Kevin Wilkey's passion for archery began when he started shooting at the age of 5. He killed his first mule deer with a bow at age 14 and entered the world of competitive archery the next year. He turned pro at 21 and proceeded to pile up tournament titles. This recently named member of the U.S. World Games team stopped in to talk with avid bow hunter and photographer Sean Matthewson. What was intended to be a discussion on arrow tuning and bow mechanics quickly turned to the mental aspect of archery and how Kevin has learned to apply the mental toughness he learned as a tournament archer to that moment of intensity that every bow hunter experiences at full draw.
My first year bow hunting, I had a kind of a reality check. I missed my first buck at like 7 yards. And that first year of hunting, I think I missed probably 30, 40 deer before I finally connected on one. And that just really fueled my passion. Yeah, I learned a ton. I'm really thankful that I didn't ever hit that first deer that I shot at, just because I learned so much. That's what really got me into competitive archery, is I got practicing a lot and I didn't like missing. It wasn't fun.
Originally, you entered competition because you hunt and you wanted to improve your shooting as a hunter by competing. Is that accurate?
Yeah, very accurate. And there weren't a lot of kids my age competing, so they didn't have a division for me. So I'd have to shoot against the adults if I wanted to do anything competitive. That's kind of what fueled it, and I think I won my first archery tournament at the age of 15.
So talk to me about kind of the things you think about and whether they cross over. Things you think about when you're addressing a target in an archery competition versus when you're hunting.
I think for tournament archery, you really have to win the tournament before you get there, because out on the practice range, when you get there, you're not going to find it unless you bring it with you. And the same thing that goes on the mountain when you're hunting deer. I mean, you've got to have all of your field skills in line, your mental skills all lined up to where you've pretty much killed the deer before you ever even step foot on the mountain. I think that's how prepared you really need to be in your mind.
When you set up for a shot, whether it's on a target field or 3D course or setting up on a game animal, is there a shot process that you go through?
Yeah, I follow the exact same sequence every time.
Arrow?
Every arrow, yep. If I'm practicing for outdoors, I think about everything, what the smell in the air, the wind on my face, a judge watching you shoot. I try to recreate all of that in my mind. And for hunting, I spend a lot of time on the 3D target, trying to make that as real as possible, visualizing, like what it's going to look like to see my arrow go into an animal, what it's going to be like when your heart's pounding, aiming at a deer that's moving, and the timing of just everything. I try to recreate that as much as possible beforehand, so when the time comes, you've got that been there, done that feeling, and it's not a foreign feeling to you. I remember the first few times that I've ever drawn back on an animal, my bow, my whole setup, everything just felt so foreign to me, like I'd never shot before in my life. And the only thing that was foreign was all the adrenaline pumping through my body that I wasn't used to. I didn't know where to channel that extra energy, and so you end up start shaking and you get buck fever, and we all know the outcome of what happens when you get that adrenaline rush.
Right. Now, have you ever been in a hunting situation where there's a big buck, he's in range, you've got the right presentation of the animal, and you go to draw and it's not quite right? Have you actually ever let your bow down on a big animal?
Yeah, I mean, just the last deer I shot, we had spotted this buck, a couple 100 yards off. So I crawled into position, got a good number on him, had my sight set. Everything was working out perfect. He was kind of feeding uphill, had no clue that I was there. I drew back on the buck and I got centered on him, and I thought my nerves were going to betray me just because my heart was pounding so heavily and it was just happening so fast. And I had to let down because it was just a little too overwhelming, and I have a very disciplined shot sequence to where I won't allow myself to make a poor shot. I owe that to the animal and I owe that to myself. And as the shot went off, it scared me just because it happened. I was just waiting for the report of the arrow, and you hear that all familiar crack sound, and I knew I'd hit him, and within seconds he was down. If I would have tried to rush that first shot or just kind of hope it would get there, I know the outcome wouldn't have been the same.
What's something I can do to maybe replicate what happens in that moment when you're shooting at a game animal that will help me to be better prepared when that moment actually occurs?
Well, there's actually quite a few things that you can practice to help you be a little more well-rounded in controlling your nerves. One thing that I always like to do is put a little money on the line with your buddies. It's amazing what a couple bucks will do, or even a Coke on the line will really make you bear down and make a good shot. Another thing that I try to do when I'm alone and just out practicing, and you know, as you're going together, your arrows run down there and safely run back and run around your house a few times before you shoot.
Right.
And that will really get your breathing up and your heart rate going, and then try to shoot and just learn to control, or not really control, but let the sight float around the target. I mean, when my bow goes off, rarely ever is my pin dead center on the target. If my pin's floating towards the middle, my arrow will usually go there. I don't try to aim it rock solid, bench rest steady, you know. Expect to see some movement, because the second you try to control that movement and make it stop is when it gets worse. So you really just allow that adrenaline to pump through you, and just let your sight do its thing. And you'll learn to control it somewhat, but not by over controlling it.